Blood dripped from the barn door's handle, its metallic scent mixing with the crisp morning air. Sarah's trembling fingers clutched her phone as she whispered into it, "Marcus, he's here." The shadow behind the barn's window shifted, revealing a figure in tattered hospital scrubs. A gleaming butcher knife caught the dawn light. Inside the farmhouse, 14-year-old Emma hugged her little brother Jack close, their breath fogging the panic room's reinforced glass as they watched their mother standing frozen in the yard. Neither child knew that the man in the barn had spent months planning this moment, or that their father's past was about to collide violently with their peaceful farm life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, Marcus stood at the edge of his newly purchased farmland, his calloused hands resting on the weathered fence post. 15 years of Navy SEAL operations had hardened his face, but there was a softness in his eyes as he watched. His children chase each other through the tall grass. The 100-acre property spread out before him like a fresh start, its rolling hills and dense woods promising the peace he'd been searching for. Sarah approached from behind, wrapping her arms around his waist. The familiar scent of her lavender shampoo brought him back to the present, away from the echoes of gunfire that still rang in his ears on quiet nights. "The moving truck will be here in an hour," she said, resting her head against his back. "Emma's already claimed the room with the bay window." Marcus nodded, his military-trained eyes automatically scanning the tree line. Old habits died hard. The farm sat isolated at the end of a long dirt road, bordered by dense forest on 3 sides. In his former life, he would have called it tactically vulnerable. Now, he hoped that vulnerability would translate to privacy, a chance for his family to heal and grow together. Jack's excited shout drew their attention. The 10-year-old had discovered the old barn, its red paint peeling, but its structure still solid. "Dad, can we fix it up? Please?" His voice carried across the field, full of childhood enthusiasm that made Marcus's heart ache. He'd missed so many moments like this during his deployments. "We'll make it better than new, buddy," Marcus called back, forcing himself to relax his stance. The farm had been a bargain, too good to pass up. The real estate agent had mentioned something about the previous owners leaving suddenly, but Marcus hadn't pressed for details. Everyone deserved their secrets. Emma joined her brother at the barn, her teenage reluctance about the move temporarily forgotten in the excitement of exploration. At 14, she was already showing signs of Sarah's grace and strength. Marcus watched as she helped Jack climb onto a lower beam, her protective instincts matching his own. The autumn breeze carried the sweet scent of hay and earth, so different from the harsh environments he'd grown accustomed to. Sarah squeezed his hand, reading his thoughts as she always could. "It's okay to feel out of place," she whispered. "We all do, but we'll make it home together." Marcus squeezed back, grateful for her understanding. The transition to civilian life hadn't been easy. The nightmares still came, filling his sleep with faces he couldn't save and decisions that haunted him. But here, surrounded by nature and family, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. The distant sound of a helicopter passing overhead made him tense instinctively. Sarah pretended not to notice, but her hand remained firmly in his until his shoulders relaxed. She'd been his anchor through the worst of the PTSD, never judging, always supporting. The farm was as much for her as it was for him, a chance to have her husband fully present, not just physically but mentally. A local sheriff's car drove slowly past their property, the officer raising a friendly hand in greeting. Marcus returned the gesture, noting the vehicle's make and speed out of habit. The nearest town was 15 minutes away, close enough for conveniences, far enough for solitude. The county's psychiatric facility was visible in the distance, its white buildings stark against the green landscape, but Marcus had researched the area thoroughly. No security incidents in 20 years. "Let's check the house again before the Truck arrives, Sarah suggested, gently pulling him toward their new home. The two-story farmhouse needed work, but its bones were good. Like them, it just needed some care and attention to reach its full potential. As they walked across the field, Marcus allowed himself to imagine a future here. Jack learning to farm, Emma studying in the window seat, Sarah finally having the space for her gardening dreams. Normal worries about mortgages and school districts instead of mission protocols and enemy movements. But some part of him, the part shaped by years of training and combat, couldn't fully relax. Something about the property nagged at his instincts. The price had been too good, the previous owner's departure too abrupt. Yet as he watched his family explore their new home, he pushed those thoughts aside. They deserved this fresh start, and he wouldn't let his paranoia taint it. The moving truck appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust on the dirt road. It was time to begin their new life, one box at a time. The local news droned from the kitchen radio as Sarah prepared breakfast, but one word caught her attention: escape. She turned up the volume, her hand freezing mid-stir over the pancake batter. Authorities at Evergreen Psychiatric Facility confirm that a patient has escaped during the night shift change. Local residents are advised to remain vigilant but calm. The patient is described as highly intelligent and potentially dangerous. Sarah's eyes drifted to the window where Marcus was teaching Jack how to mend the fence. 2 weeks into farm life, and her husband's nightmares had grown worse, not better. Last night, she'd found him doing perimeter checks at 3 in the morning. Checking locks he'd already checked twice before. Emma slouched into the kitchen, her phone perpetually in hand. "Mom, did you know this place has, the worst internet ever?" She slumped into a chair, but her typical teenage complaint stopped when she saw her mother's expression. "What's wrong?" Sarah forced a smile, switching off the radio. "Nothing. Honey, just thinking about all the work we still need to do." She wouldn't share her concerns about the escape. Marcus's hypervigilance was already affecting the children. Emma had started double-checking her window locks at night, and Jack was asking questions about his father's midnight wanderings. Outside, Marcus suddenly straightened, his posture shifting from father to soldier in an instant. A delivery truck had appeared on their road, normal as could be, but Sarah recognized the change in her husband. His eyes tracked the vehicle, his body subtly positioning itself between the potential threat and Jack. These micro-reactions had become more frequent lately. The kitchen door opened, and Marcus ushered Jack inside. "Take a break, buddy, get some water." But Sarah knew that tone. He wanted his son safely indoors while he assessed the situation. Jack, still innocent to these undertones, happily bounded to the fridge. "It's just old Joe with the feed delivery," Sarah said softly, touching Marcus's arm. He nodded, but she felt the tension in his muscles. "I know," he replied, his voice low enough that the children couldn't hear. "But did you hear the news this morning? About the escape?" Sarah's heart sank. Of course he'd heard it. Probably. Knew before the news even reported it. "We can't let it consume us, Marcus. The facility's miles away." He brushed his thumb across her cheek, a gesture of affection that didn't match his vigilant eyes. "Miles don't mean much to someone determined. Enough. I've seen what desperation can do." That evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah found Marcus in their home office, surrounded by printouts, news articles about the psychiatric facility, satellite maps of the area, weather reports. His laptop displayed local police bulletins. "The patient they're not talking about," he said without looking up. "The one who escaped? He was admitted after a series of home invasions. Not random ones. He targeted specific families, studied them for weeks before striking." Sarah sat beside him, her stomach churning. "How do you know that?" "I have contacts, called in some favors." He pushed a paper toward her. "The facility's been covering up incidents for years. That's why the previous owners left so suddenly. They knew. A chill ran through Sarah as she remembered Emma mentioning strange noises from the barn last week. They dismissed it as raccoons. "Should we leave?" Marcus finally looked at her, his expression softening. "No, running isn't the answer. This is our home now. We just need to be prepared." He pulled her close, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. "I won't let anything happen to our family. Not again." The again hung heavy in the air between them. They never talked about the incident during his last deployment, when an insurgent group had discovered his family's location. The safe house had been compromised, and Sarah had been forced to protect the children alone for 3 terrifying hours before extraction arrived. She'd proven stronger than anyone expected, but the experience had changed them all. Outside, a branch snapped. In the darkness, Marcus was at the window in an instant, his movement fluid and silent. Sarah watched as he scanned the property with practiced eyes, knowing he was cataloguing every shadow, every potential point of entry. The police had promised increased patrols, but Marcus knew better than to rely on others for his family's safety. Tomorrow, he would begin installing new security measures. For now, he returned to his research, gathering intelligence like he'd done countless times before. Sarah touched his shoulder as she left for bed, feeling the familiar knot of worry and love in her chest. Sometimes she wondered if they'd ever truly escaped the war, or if they'd just brought it home with them to the farm. The first sign something was wrong came in the form of a missing hammer. Marcus noticed its absence while organizing the barn's tool wall, where he kept everything meticulously arranged, a habit carried over from his military days. The gap on the pegboard stood out like a missing tooth. "Kids been in here?" he asked Sarah that evening as she helped him inventory the barn. "No, they know the rules. Tools are off limits without supervision." She frowned at his expression. "Maybe it fell behind the workbench?" But Marcus had already checked. He checked everywhere, just like he'd checked when the pruning shears disappeared last week. The rational part of his brain suggested mundane explanations, misplaced tools during the move, forgotten loans to neighbors. Yet his instincts, honed through years of combat, whispered otherwise. The horses sensed it too. The usually calm animals had grown skittish, especially during the night. Marcus found them huddled in one corner of their paddock each morning, ears pricked toward the woods. The local vet blamed coyotes, but Marcus had tracked predators before. This was different. Emma was the next to notice something odd. "Dad," she called one afternoon, her voice carrying across the yard. "Someone's been in my garden." Marcus crossed the distance in seconds, scanning the small vegetable patch Emma had started. The tomato plants were undisturbed, but there were clear boot prints in the soft soil, large, deliberate impressions that didn't match any of their shoes. More concerning was the half-eaten tomato left on the garden's edge, teeth marks visible. "In the red flesh, probably deer," he said, forcing a casual tone for his daughter's benefit. But deer didn't wear boots, and they didn't take single bites of tomatoes before discarding them. This was a message, a deliberate sign that someone had been there. That night, Marcus installed motion sensors around the property's perimeter. Sarah watched from the porch as he worked, her arms wrapped around herself against more than just the evening chill. "The children are asking questions," she said when he returned. "Emma's not stupid. She knows those weren't deer tracks." Marcus nodded, cleaning his hands with deliberate care. "Jack found something today, too. A makeshift bed in the old storm cellar, blankets, food wrappers." Sarah's breath caught. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Because I needed to be sure." He met her eyes. "Someone's been living on our property. Sarah, watching us, learning our routines." The implications hung heavy between them. The psychiatric facility was still searching for their escaped patient, but the police updates had grown less frequent. Most people assumed the patient had fled to the city, where it would be easier to disappear. A sharp crack echoed from the woods, like a branch being deliberately broken. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to his hip, where his sidearm would have been during his service years. Now, the gesture found empty air, a civilian's vulnerability. Inside, they could hear Emma practicing her flute, the melodic sounds drifting through the evening air. Jack's voice joined in with enthusiastic but off-key singing. Their innocent joy felt suddenly fragile. "I want you to take the kids to your sisters," Marcus said quietly. Sarah's response was immediate. "No, we're not splitting up. Not again." The memory of those 3 hours in the safe house flickered between them. Before Marcus could argue, the motion sensor at the far end of the property triggered. Its subtle alert chimed on his phone. A technological tripwire. He pulled up the security camera feed, but the darkening woods revealed nothing obvious. Yet something had changed in the atmosphere. The crickets had gone silent. The horses in the paddock stood frozen, their ears forward, nostrils flaring. Even the children's music had stopped, as if the whole farm held its breath. Marcus moved to the window, his body automatically positioning itself to minimize his silhouette. The setting sun cast long shadows across their land, transforming familiar shapes into potential threats. Somewhere out there, someone was watching, waiting, learning. Sarah joined him, her hand finding his in the growing darkness. They stood together, guardians of their family's peace, knowing that this calm wouldn't last. The question wasn't if their unwanted guest would make themselves known, but when. In the distance, a lone coyote howled, or perhaps it was something else, something that only mimicked natural sounds. The horses shifted nervously in their paddock, and somewhere in the woods, a shadow moved against shadows. Sarah's breath misted in the early morning air as she walked toward the stables. Marcus had left at dawn to meet with the local sheriff, and the kids were still asleep in the house. The horses needed feeding, patient or no patient. Life on a farm didn't stop for fear. The stable door hung slightly open. Wrong. Sarah always latched it at night, a habit Marcus had drilled into them all. She stopped, every nerve suddenly alert. The horses were unusually quiet. "Hello?" Her voice sounded thin in the morning stillness. No response, just the soft whisper of hay shifting in the breeze. She should go back to the house, call Marcus. But if something was wrong with the horses... The interior of the stable was dim, morning light filtering through dusty windows. Sarah reached for the light switch, but nothing happened when she flipped it. The bulb was missing, she realized. Not burnt out, missing entirely. A horse whinnied softly from its stall, more a warning than a greeting. Sarah's hand found the pitchfork leaning against the wall. The metal felt cold and inadequate in her grip. "I wondered when we'd meet properly." The voice came from the shadows near the back stall, male, educated, unnervingly calm. "You're always so careful with the locks, Sarah." Her name in his mouth felt like a violation. A figure stepped forward, tall, lean, wearing what had once been hospital scrubs under a stolen jacket. His face was weathered but intelligent, eyes sharp with an unsettling clarity. "My husband will be back any minute," Sarah said, proud that her voice didn't shake. The man smiled. "No, he won't. The sheriff's office is 23 minutes away. You always kiss Marcus goodbye at 6:43 a.m. when he has morning meetings. He'll return at 7:49 a.m. unless traffic is unusually heavy." The precision of his knowledge sent ice through Sarah's veins. How long had he been watching them? "The children wake at 7:15. He continued conversationally, taking a step closer. "Emma takes 9 minutes in the bathroom. Jack sleeps until you call him at 7:30. You're creatures of habit. It makes you vulnerable." Sarah's grip tightened on the pitchfork. "What do you want?" "Want?" He seemed genuinely puzzled. "I want him to know what it feels like. The waiting, the watching, the inevitable." His face hardened. "He took everything from me. Now I get to return the favor." He moved with sudden speed, crossing half the distance between them before Sarah could react. She swung the pitchfork in a wide arc, forcing him back. One of the horses kicked its stall door, the sound like a gunshot in the enclosed space. "Brave," he said, sounding pleased. "He trained you well, but not well enough." His hand emerged from the jacket pocket, holding a syringe, its contents catching the weak light. Sarah turned and ran. Behind her, she heard not pursuit but laughter, soft, controlled, terrible in its confidence. She burst out of the stable into bright morning sunlight, not stopping until she reached the house. Her trembling fingers found her phone. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Sarah, he's here," she gasped. "In the stable. He knows our schedules, Marcus. He knows everything." Through the kitchen window, she could see the stable. The door swung gently in the morning breeze, but the man was gone. On the window pane drawn in the dust was a simple message. Lesson 1. Marcus burst through the sheriff's office doors, his face carved from stone. "Tell me everything you know about the escaped patient. Now." Sheriff Davidson looked up from his computer, his expression grim. "Just got his full file. You're not going to like this, Marcus." He turned the monitor around. "Thomas Reed, former Force Recon, highly decorated until what?" Marcus's hands gripped the edge of the desk. "Until a classified operation went wrong. Something in Yemen. Most of the files are redacted, but he had a complete psychological break. Killed 3 of his own men before they could subdue him." Back at the farm, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with 2 deputies, her hands wrapped around an untouched cup of coffee. Emma and Jack were upstairs, doors locked, supposedly doing homework, but more likely listening to every word. "He had this with him," Sarah said, sliding her phone across the table. On it was a photo of the dust message. "Lesson 1. He's teaching us something, or thinks he is." The deputy nodded, typing notes. "We found his observation post in the woods. Professional setup. Maps, schedules, photos of your family. He's been watching you for weeks, maybe months." Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah updating him on the deputy's findings. His jaw clenched as he read about the surveillance. "Sheriff, there's something you're not telling me." Davidson sighed heavily. "Reed wasn't just any patient at Evergreen. He was in maximum security, but not for the Yemen incident. 3 years ago, he escaped a different facility, targeted a family, military family like yours, spent weeks terrorizing them before what? Before he executed them. Parents, kids, even the dog, said he was teaching them about fear. When they caught him, he just smiled and said, 'Lesson completed.'" Marcus's blood turned to ice. The similarities were too precise to be coincidence. He chose us, specifically us. Why? "That's the thing," Davidson said, pulling up another file. "Reed's last mission, the one in Yemen. You were there, Marcus. Different unit, but same operation. He blames you for what happened, says you abandoned your post, left his men exposed." The memory hit Marcus like a physical blow. That night in Yemen, the impossible choice. The radio calls for help from 2 positions. He could only respond to one. He'd chosen to save the civilian hospital over Reed's team, knowing it would mean casualties. "We're mobilizing everything we have," Davidson continued. "State police are setting up roadblocks. FBI's been notified." "It won't matter," Marcus said quietly. "He's not trying to escape. This is his mission now. My family is his target, and he won't stop until—" His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Remember Yemen, Captain. Lesson 2 begins at nightfall." Marcus was already moving. "Get your men out of my house," he ordered, dialing Sarah. "They'll only get in the way and he'll use them against us. This is between him and me. Marcus, you can't handle this alone. I'm not alone." Sarah had picked up. "Get the guns from the safe," he told her. "All of them. And the med kit from my deployment bag. It's time to show the kids what Mom and Dad really did before farming." As Marcus drove home, he radioed the deputies at his farm. "Clear out. Now. Tell my wife to initiate Protocol Echo." It was a code they'd established years ago after the safe house incident. Sarah would know what to do. The sun was already lowering toward the horizon. Somewhere in the growing shadows, Reed was watching, waiting, preparing his next move. But this time, Marcus would be ready. His family had escaped death once before in that safe house. They'd survived because Sarah proved stronger than anyone. Expected. Now it was time for Reed to learn that he wasn't the only one who knew about fear. The farmhouse's dining room had transformed into a command center. Maps covered the table, weighted down with ammunition boxes and emergency supplies. Sarah moved with military precision as she checked each weapon, muscle memory from her years. As a combat medic taking over, remember what I taught you about pressure points? Marcus asked Emma, who stood nervously beside him. The teenager nodded, her usual social media-obsessed demeanor replaced by intense focus. Throat, eyes, groin, she recited. Strike hard, no hesitation, run to the panic room. Jack sat cross-legged on the floor, methodically sorting medical supplies into a tactical bag. At 10, he was too young to handle weapons, but Sarah had taught him basic field medicine, knowledge that could save lives if things went wrong. The panic room has 3 weeks of supplies, Marcus explained, checking the reinforced doors mechanism. Satellite phone, water filtration, medical kit. If anything happens to your mother or me... Nothing's going to happen, Sarah interrupted firmly, loading a magazine with practiced efficiency. We're all walking away from this. Marcus nodded, but his eyes told a different story. He'd seen Reed's handiwork in Yemen. The man didn't leave survivors. He left messages, lessons written in blood. The property's rigged, Marcus continued, pointing to a tablet showing security camera feeds. Motion sensors every 20 yards, tripwires in the obvious approach routes. He'll expect those, but they'll force him to use more time, make more noise. Sarah pulled out their old combat headsets, equipment kept just in case that was now proving invaluable. Comms check, she said, fitting one over Emma's ear. Channel 3, encrypted. Marcus watched his wife guide their daughter through the equipment check. Sarah had been more than a combat medic. She'd been one of the best. The safe house incident 3 years ago had proven that. While Marcus was deployed, she'd kept the children alive against trained killers for 3 hours, using nothing but household items and sheer will. The barn's our weak point, Marcus said, marking locations on the map. Too many entry points, too much cover. But it's also where he'll expect us to be vulnerable. A small smile crossed his face. So let's use that. Jack raised his hand like he was in school. What about the horses? Already moved them to the neighbor's farm, Sarah assured him. Davidson's deputy is watching them. Marcus checked his watch. Sunset in 42 minutes. Reed's message had promised Lesson 2 would begin at nightfall. The former Force Recon operator was probably already in position, watching them prepare. Emma, run through the panic room sequence again, Marcus ordered. Jack, show me your route to the secondary safe spot. As the children demonstrated their escape plans, Sarah pulled Marcus aside. He'll try to separate us, she whispered. Use the kids to draw us out. I know. Marcus squeezed her hand. That's why Protocol Echo has a second phase. One, he won't. Expect, Sarah's eyes widened slightly. You don't mean your old unit's standing by. One call, they're 20 minutes out, but only if absolutely necessary. This needs to end quietly. A subtle beep from the tablet interrupted them. Motion sensor triggered at the farm's perimeter. Marcus checked the camera feed. Nothing visible, but a flock of birds had taken flight from the woods. Someone was moving out there. Places, Marcus commanded. The family moved with practiced coordination, each taking their assigned position. Emma and Jack retreated to the panic room's antechamber, ready to seal themselves inside at the first sign of trouble. Sarah checked her medical kit one final time. Just like old times, she said with a grim smile. Marcus touched the familiar scar on his left forearm, a reminder of that night in Yemen, of choices made and consequences paid. Somewhere in the gathering darkness, Thomas Reed was preparing to make him pay again. But Reed had made one critical mistake. He'd studied their routines, learned their schedules, mapped their movements. But he'd underestimated them, assumed they were just another soft civilian family playing at farm life. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The first message appeared on Emma's bedroom mirror, written in condensation from the shower steam. "Ask Daddy about the hospital in Yemen." Emma's scream brought Marcus running, weapon drawn, only to find his daughter staring at the words with trembling hands. "He was in here," she whispered, "while I was showering." Marcus swept the room, checking windows, closets, vents, everything sealed, untouched. Reed hadn't broken in. He'd written the message earlier, knowing it would only appear when Emma showered. A calculated move designed to shatter their sense of security. Sarah appeared in the doorway, face tight with controlled anger. "There's more," she said, leading them to the kitchen. On the refrigerator held by their alphabet magnets, their screams lasted hours. Jack's voice crackled over their comms. "Dad, the playground." The boy's voice trailed off. Marcus moved to the window. In the backyard, Jack's swing set had been transformed into a macabre display. Reed had hung combat helmets from the chains, not props, but real helmets, scorched and damaged. Marcus recognized them instantly. They belonged to Reed's men who died in Yemen, inside Jack, now. Marcus's voice was steady, but Sarah saw his hands clench into fists. The psychological assault continued throughout the day. Every hour brought a new discovery, each one more personal than the last. Reed had done his research, finding pressure points that went beyond simple threats. Emma found her college application essays replaced with detailed descriptions of the Yemen hospital bombing. Jack's history homework now contained graphic photos of combat casualties. Even Sarah's medical journals had been annotated with handwritten accounts of battlefield trauma. "He's trying to make us doubt you," Sarah said quietly as they swept the house for the third time. "Trying to turn the kids against—" The power cut out, plunging the house into darkness. Emergency lights kicked in automatically, casting strange shadows on the walls. Through their comms, they heard Emma's sharp intake of breath. "Status check," Marcus barked. "Panic room secure," Emma reported. "Secondary position holding," Jack added. Sarah started toward the breaker box, but Marcus caught her arm. "Wait!" He pointed to the window, where a laptop had appeared on the front porch, its screen glowing in the darkness. The security feed showed a video playing. Grainy night vision footage from Yemen. Marcus recognized it, the moment he'd had to choose between saving Reed's team or the hospital full of civilians. "Your father had a choice." Reed's voice came through their comms, somehow having accessed their encrypted channel. "The noble Captain Marcus, decorated SEAL family man. Tell me, children, did he ever mention how he left 6 men to die? Men with families of their own?" "Don't engage," Marcus warned, but Emma's voice already crackled through. "You're lying," she said. "My dad's a hero." Reed's laugh was soft, almost gentle. "Heroes don't exist, sweet Emma. Only survivors and victims. Ask your mother about the safe house incident. Ask her what she had to do to those men. Ask her if she feels heroic about it." Sarah's face went pale. She'd never told the children exactly what happened that day, how she'd been forced to take lives to protect them. "Trying to turn us against each other won't work," Marcus transmitted. "We know who you are, Thomas. What happened to you? Do you?" Reed's voice took on an edge. "Then you know this is just the beginning. Every hour, another truth, another secret, another lesson. By sunrise, your precious family will see you for what you really are." The laptop screen changed, showing thermal imaging of their house. Every hiding spot, every defensive position marked in glowing detail. Reed had their entire setup mapped. "Your barricades won't stop me," Reed continued. "Your panic room won't. Protect them. You designed this farm's security yourself, Marcus. Did you really think I wouldn't know how to bypass it? After all, you taught me. Yemen, remember? Joint operations planning." Marcus felt his blood run cold. He had helped train Reed's unit in tactical planning. Everything he'd set up here, every defensive measure, Reed would know how to counter it. Outside, the motion sensors began triggering one by one, forming a circle around the house. Reed was out there, moving freely through their defenses, demonstrating his control of the situation. "Lesson 2, his voice whispered through their comms. "Trust is fragile, truth is a weapon, and the night is still young." The attack came from an impossible angle. A smoke grenade crashed through the kitchen window, but instead of billowing out, the smoke was sucked upward into the ventilation system. Marcus realized Reed's plan a second too late. "Gas masks," he shouted, but the smoke was already spreading through the house's air ducts. Reed had turned their home's modern ventilation system into a weapon. Emma's cough crackled through the comms, followed by Jack's panicked breathing. Sarah was already moving, her combat medic training kicking in. "Kids, wet clothes over your faces. Remember the drills." Marcus fought the urge to run to his children. Reed would expect that, wanted them to bunch up, become easier targets. Instead, he keyed his radio. "Protocol Echo, Phase 2, Authorization Alpha 7 Delta. Outside, a subtle click-click-click began. The farm's sprinkler system activated, but it wasn't spraying water. Marcus had modified it weeks ago, loading it with pepper spray solution. If Reed was watching their thermal signatures, he'd need to move or be blinded. A shadow darted between the trees. Marcus squeezed off 2 shots, forcing the figure back into cover, but something was wrong. The movement was too obvious, too... "It's a diversion," Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Marcus, the barn!" The explosion rocked the farmhouse, shattering windows and rattling walls. The barn erupted in flames, but Marcus recognized the distinctive blue tinge to the fire. Military-grade accelerant. Reed wasn't trying to burn it down. He was using the fire's light to eliminate shadows, turning the night against them. "Status," Marcus demanded. "Safe room compromised," Emma reported, her voice steady despite her fear. "Smoke's coming through the air system, but we've sealed the vents." "Secondary position holding," Jack added. "Mum's with me." Sarah's voice confirmed. "We're okay." But Marcus, the medical supplies were in the barn. Another calculated strike. Reed was eliminating their resources one by one. The smoke grenades had forced them to use their emergency masks. The barn explosion had taken out their medical backup. What would be next? A phone rang. Not their cells, but the old landline they never used. It sat on the kitchen counter, its display showing an impossible number, Marcus's own military ID from 15 years ago. "Your turn to make a choice, Captain," Reed's voice purred through the speaker. "The smoke in the ventilation system, it's getting into the panic room, slowly, but steadily. Emma's asthma gives her, 20 minutes? And your son's back up. Insulin is burning in the barn. Tick-tock." Marcus felt his throat tighten. How did Reed know about Jack's diabetes? "But I'm not unreasonable," Reed continued. "Surrender yourself. Walk out the front door, and I'll give Sarah the antidote to the smoke. A captain's life for his family. Isn't that the choice you should have made in Yemen?" Sarah's voice cut through the comms. "Marcus, don't you dare—" "Quiet," Marcus hissed. Something in Reed's voice had changed, a hint of strain, of urgency. He wasn't just taunting them. He needed this confrontation to happen now, which meant, "Your backup's coming, isn't it?" Marcus said into the phone. "That's why you're pushing so hard. Your real team, the ones who helped you escape. They're on their way, and you need this, finished before they arrive." A moment of silence confirmed his guess. Reed wasn't working alone. The surveillance, the psychological warfare, the tactical precision. He'd had help. But whoever was coming, Reed wanted the family dealt with. First, wanted it to be personal? Smart, Reed finally said. But knowing doesn't help you. Everyone has a breaking point, Marcus. Even your precious family. Let's find out what yours is. The landline went dead. Through the smoke and fire-lit darkness, a new sound emerged. Music. Speakers hidden around the property began playing a haunting melody that Marcus recognized from Yemen, the last song that had played in the hospital before the bombs fell. Sarah, Marcus transmitted, remember Rio, the favela operation? God, not that plan, she responded. We barely survived it the first time, but it worked. Emma, Jack, new positions. We're done reacting. Time to show Reed what this family can really do. As his children moved silently through the smoke-filled house, Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. Reed thought he was breaking them, pushing them to their limits. But he'd forgotten the most important lesson from Yemen. Sometimes, the prey had to become the predator. Darkness became total as Reed systematically destroyed their power infrastructure. First the main lines, then the backup generator, and finally the emergency batteries. But the family moved through the blackness with practiced ease. This, too, they had drilled for. Remember, Sarah's voice whispered through their comms, we're not trapped in here with him. He's trapped in here with us. Marcus tracked multiple heat signatures on his thermal scope. Reed was no longer hiding his team's presence. 4 figures moved through the property's perimeter, their movements displaying clear military training. But they were moving too confidently, too easily through his defenses. They've got our security layout, he transmitted, but not the new ones. Emma, status. Their daughter's voice came back strong and controlled. Charges set. Remote triggers active. The gymnastics classes they'd encouraged took on new meaning as Emma used the ventilation system to move through the house, planting their surprises. Jack, Sarah called. Ready, their son whispered. I can see 2 of them from here. He'd stationed himself in the hidden observatory they'd built into the water tower, his job to relay enemy positions. Sarah moved silently through the ground floor, medical kit strapped to her back. The smoke was thinning, but she'd already noted its unique chemical signature. Not standard CS gas, this was something custom, something designed to incapacitate without killing. Reed wanted them alive, wanted them to suffer, a metallic scratch at the back door, someone picking the lock. Marcus smiled in the darkness. 3, 2, 1. The intruder breached the door and immediately triggered the UV paint trap. Invisible, into the naked eye, but now his thermal gear would be useless, the special paint blocking all infrared signatures. They heard cursing, followed by the sound of night vision goggles being ripped off. 1 blind, Jack reported. He's backing toward the barn. Wait, movement in the east tree line. Big guy, military gear, moving fast toward the house. Sarah's voice cut in. Marcus, Reed's not with them. These are just his backup. The kitchen floor exploded upward. Reed had been in the storm cellar the entire time, cutting through. From below, Sarah spun, medical kit swinging like a weapon, but Reed was faster. His hand caught her throat as he emerged from the hole like a demon from the pit. Hello, Sarah, he growled. Time for your family to learn what real fear feels like. Marcus was already moving, but Reed's next words stopped him cold. 1 more step and I triggered the device I planted in Emma's precious garden. Your daughter's out there right now, isn't she? Planting charges? Tick-tock, Captain. The family's comms crackled. Emma's breathing had gotten worse, the smoke's effects taking hold despite her precautions. Jack's voice shook as he reported. Another team member approaching his position. They were being overwhelmed, their carefully laid plans unraveling. Reed had counted on their love for each other, knew it would paralyze them when forced to choose between family members. Sarah met Marcus's eyes through the darkness. A silent message passed between them, the same look they'd shared during the safe house incident. Marcus's fingers found his radio's secondary channel. Protocol echo, he whispered. Phase 3. The farm's irrigation system hummed to life. But instead of pepper spray, something else began pumping through the lines, something from Sarah's old combat medic days. The same compound she'd used in the safe house, a neural inhibitor that would affect anyone not already inoculated. Reed's eyes widened as he recognized the familiar smell. "You didn't—" Sarah smiled through his grip on her throat. "We've been dosing ourselves with the antidote for weeks. Ever since you started leaving signs. Welcome to our nightmare." Outside, Reed's team began to falter as the invisible compound took effect. But Reed himself stood firm, his hand tightening on Sarah's throat. "Doesn't matter," he snarled. "Your precious family's still scattered, divided just like Yemen. Time to learn what that feels like, Marcus. Who will you choose to save first?" Marcus moved like a ghost through his own home, each step calculated. Reed's team was struggling with the neural inhibitor, but they weren't out, just disoriented. More dangerous now, maybe. Their training fighting against chemical confusion. "Emma, get to high ground," he transmitted. "Jack, do not leave your position." The water tower was their most defensible location, and his son was safer there than moving. "Copy," both children responded, their voices steady despite the chaos. Through the thermal scope, Marcus tracked 2 of Reed's men stumbling near the tree line. Their movements were erratic, but their weapons remained ready. Military muscle memory ran deep. A crash from the kitchen made his heart jump. Sarah and Reed were still fighting, the sounds of their struggle echoing through the house. His wife was a skilled combatant, but Reed was powered by something darker than training. "Your team's failing," Sarah's voice carried through the house. "The neural agent was expected," Reed cut her off. "Why do you think I chose tonight? A storm's coming. The rain will clear the air in less than an hour." Marcus checked the sky through a broken window. Dark clouds were gathering, just as Reed said. Their chemical advantage had a time limit. Burst of static in his earpiece. Someone was trying to jam their comms. Reed's tech specialist was still functioning. They were running out of options. "Dad," Emma's whisper came through before the signal died completely. "Someone's in the walls." Marcus's blood ran cold. The house's construction included maintenance tunnels between the walls, part of its modern design. He'd sealed them weeks ago, but if Reed had been watching that long, a metallic scratching sound came from inside the walls, moving upward. They were using the tunnels to flank Emma's position. "Sarah!" Marcus called out. "Emma's compromised. North wall. Little busy." His wife's response was punctuated by the sound of breaking glass. Marcus had to choose. His daughter was in immediate danger, but Sarah was facing Reed himself. The same impossible choice as Yemen: split his forces or pick a single target. The scratching in the walls grew louder. Emma's breathing sounded labored over the failing comms, the smoke's effects worsening. And somewhere in the storm-darkened house, his wife faced a psychopath alone. A memory flashed, the safe house incident. He'd been forced to listen over the radio as Sarah protected their children. She'd made the hard choices then. Now it was his turn. "Jack," he transmitted through the static. "Remember the fishing trip? The special fireworks?" His son's reply was immediate. "Yes, sir. Red or green?" "Both." "On my mark." Marcus reached into his pocket, feeling the rough surface of the detonator Emma had planted. Reed thought he knew their tactics, expected Marcus to follow standard operating procedure. But farming had taught them new tricks. The scratching in the walls reached the second floor. Emma's position, almost time. "Sarah," he called out, "remember Dubai?" Through the chaos he heard his wife laugh. "That's insane." "That's the plan." 3 minutes, Reed's voice carried through the darkness. "Planning something noble, Captain? Going to sacrifice yourself to save them? That's not how this story ends." But Marcus was already moving. The neural inhibitor had bought them time, scattered Reed's team. Now they would use that chaos. "Jack!" "Mark!" The night exploded into color. As emergency flares shot from the water tower, red and green chemical lights that transformed the battlefield. Reed's team, their night vision equipment still active, would be instantly blinded. The storm clouds reflected the light, creating a disorienting strobe effect across the farm. Through his scope, Marcus watched the signatures of Reed's men stumbling, disoriented by the combination of neural agent and sudden light. But more importantly, he saw what they couldn't. Sarah had managed to slip Reed's grasp in the confusion. The scratching in the walls reached Emma's position. Time for the hard choice. Marcus raised his rifle, took aim at his own house, and whispered a single word into his dying radio. Now. The explosion ripped through the north wall of the house, precisely targeted to the maintenance tunnel. Marcus had rigged the farm's fertilizer storage weeks ago, not for explosive power, but for the release of pressurized ammonia gas. Anyone in the tunnel would be instantly incapacitated. Emma's voice crackled through dying comms. Clear, but can't breathe. The smoke, the ammonia, her asthma, a lethal combination. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Marcus, her inhalers. In the medical kit. Reed has it. Thunder rolled overhead as the storm closed in. They had minutes before rain would neutralize their chemical defenses. Through his scope, Marcus tracked 2 of Reed's men still mobile, fighting through the neural inhibitors' effects. The tech specialist had taken cover in the ruined barn, likely coordinating their communications disruption, but Reed himself had vanished, taking the medical kit and Emma's lifeline with him. Jack's voice shook as he reported from the water tower. Dad, Emma's lips are turning blue and I think my blood sugar's crashing. The insulin, also in the medical kit. Reed had found their weakness, the children's medical conditions, and turned it against them. A timer counting down to an impossible choice. Sarah appeared at Marcus's side, blood trickling from a cut above her eye. He's herding us, she whispered, using the kids as bait. He wants us to split up, to choose. Like Yemen, Marcus growled. The hospital or Reed's team, the choice that started this nightmare. A child's cough echoed through the house, followed by desperate wheezing. Emma was deteriorating fast. Jack's voice grew more distant, the early signs of diabetic shock setting in. Marcus, Sarah's voice was steel. We're out of options. Call them. He knew what she meant. The phone number memorized but never used. A tactical response team from her old unit, standing by since this began. But calling them would expose everything, their past, their real identities, the truth they'd hidden from their children. Static burst through their comms, Reed's voice distorted but clear. Tick-tock, Captain. The girl has minutes, the boy, maybe an hour, but my team's already called for extraction. When they arrive, everyone dies. Unless I surrender, Marcus finished. Not just you. I want you both. The heroes of the safe house incident. Did you tell your children how many men their mother killed that day? How their father's choices led to that slaughter? Emma's wheezing grew worse. Jack stopped responding to radio checks. Sarah checked her last magazine. 3 rounds. Marcus had 5. The neural inhibitor was fading, Reed's men regaining coordination. The storm would hit any minute. He's right, Sarah whispered. We're out of time. Marcus looked at his wife, seeing the same determination that had kept their children alive in that safe house. They'd sworn to leave that life behind, to give their kids normalcy, but now those same dark skills were their only hope. Plan B, he said quietly. Sarah's eyes widened. That's suicide. No. Marcus touched his wife's face. It's sacrifice. Get to Emma. I'll handle Jack. When Reed moves on me, I'll be ready. Sarah's voice broke. But Marcus, Plan B means they'll know. Everything. Thunder cracked overhead, closer now. Their children were dying. Their defenses were failing. And somewhere in the darkness, Reed waited to spring his final trap. Marcus keyed his radio one last time. Emma, Jack, I need you to be brave. What happens next? What you're about to learn about your parents." He couldn't finish. "How do you tell your children that their whole life has been a cover? That their ordinary farmer parents were something else entirely?" Sarah squeezed his hand and took over. "Remember the stories we told you about the monsters who get defeated in the end? We never told you. Sometimes the heroes have to become monsters to protect what they love." The storm broke, rain beginning to fall. In the distance, helicopters approached, Reed's extraction team, coming to end this game. Marcus raised his rifle and triggered the last of Emma's planted charges. Not to attack, but to signal. 3 explosions. A pattern any special forces operator would recognize, a covert call for help, a Black Ops signal meaning one thing: scorched earth protocol authorized. The truth exploded across the farm's security monitors, which suddenly crackled to life with classified footage. Reed had hacked their system one final time, but not to threaten, to reveal. The screen showed a different Marcus, younger, leading a covert operation briefing. Beside him stood Reed, then a decorated force recon commander. But it wasn't Yemen. The timestamp showed 3 days before the hospital incident. "You remember this briefing, Captain?" Reed's voice echoed through the house. "When you recruited my team for your little side operation?" Sarah's breath caught as she watched. This wasn't in any official record. This was something darker. The footage continued. Marcus outlining a plan to use Reed's team as cover for a Black Ops mission. The hospital wasn't just a hospital. It was a front for a terrorist bioweapons lab. The civilian casualties weren't accidents. They were necessary eliminations of contaminated victims. "Your father," Reed announced to the children over the comms, "needed my team to take the fall, to be the official story while his real unit handled the cleanup. We were the sacrifice play." Emma's wheezing paused as the truth sank in. Jack watched from the water tower, his medical crisis momentarily forgotten in the shock of revelation. "Your mother wasn't just a combat medic," Reed continued. "She was a chemical weapons specialist. Those neural agents you're using tonight, her designs, the safe house incident, a cleanup operation to eliminate witnesses." The monitors switched to new footage. Sarah in a high-tech lab, developing the very compounds they were using against Reed's team. Then more footage, the safe house, showing her efficiently eliminating armed men with clinical precision. "We're not just farmers," Sarah said quietly to her children through the comms. "We were part of a unit so classified even the SEALs don't know it exists. We handled the missions that couldn't exist, the choices that no one could know about. But Yemen was different," Marcus added, his voice heavy. "The bioweapons were more devastating than we'd anticipated. Reed's team, they weren't supposed to be exposed, weren't supposed to survive. But I did survive," Reed snarled. "Watched my men die in agony while your real team swept in to rescue the situation. The hospital staff, the patients, all agents, all part of your cover. While my men, my loyal soldiers, were sacrificed for your perfect narrative." The final footage played Reed being taken to the psychiatric facility, not as a patient, but as a containment measure. His psychological break wasn't from trauma. It was a side effect of the bioweapon exposure, an exposure Marcus had knowingly risked. "Now you understand," Reed's voice softened, "why your children had to learn the truth, had to see what their heroic parents really are, the experiments, the sacrifices, the lies." Thunder cracked overhead as the full weight of their past crashed down around them. Their peaceful farm life, their fresh start, all built on the ashes of Reed's destroyed team, on a foundation of necessary evils and classified horrors. Emma's voice came weak through the comms. "Dad, is it true?" Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of a decade of lies crushing him. "Yes, we thought we could leave it behind, give you a normal life." "Normal?" Reed laughed. "There's no normal for people like us, Captain. Only survivors and victims. And tonight, your children learn which one they are." The medical kit appeared on the porch, Emma's inhaler and Jack's insulin clearly visible inside. A final choice. Reveal the truth and save their children, or keep their secrets and watch them suffer. But Reed had forgotten one thing. The scorched earth signal wasn't just a call for help. It was an activation code. The activation code triggered something deep within the farm's infrastructure. Panels slid open in walls, revealing caches of advanced weapons. The barn's burned shell flickered as a holographic camouflage system failed, exposing a state-of-the-art command center beneath the rural facade. "You didn't think we'd really retire, did you, Reed?" Sarah's voice carried a new edge, her farmer's wife persona falling away like a shed skin. "The farm was never our escape. It's our active mission." Emma's next cough came through clearer. The hidden air filtration system finally engaging, cleaning the toxic smoke from the house. In the water tower, Jack's screens came alive, showing satellite feeds and tactical data far beyond civilian grade. "Mom." Jack's voice was steadier now. "The tower. It's some kind of surveillance hub." "Remote operations center," Sarah corrected. "That's why we encouraged your interest in computers, honey. You've been training on military-grade systems disguised as farming equipment." Reed's laugh crackled through their now crystal-clear comms, the jamming suddenly ineffective against their activated tech. "Clever, using your own children as unwitting operators, but you're not the only one with hidden resources." The approaching helicopters changed formation, their signatures matching black ops patterns. Not just extraction, but a full tactical team. Reed had his own operation in play. "Did you think I was really in that facility for 3 years?" Reed's voice held new confidence. "We had our own mission, our own plans. Yemen was just the beginning of something much bigger." Marcus moved through the house, accessing hidden panels, arming security systems that had laid dormant for years. "The farm's location wasn't random," he told his children. "We've been monitoring Reed's real organization, gathering intel, waiting." "And now you've activated the base ahead of schedule," Reed snarled. "Forced our hand. Tell me, Captain, are you ready for your children to see what a real black op looks like?" Emma's voice came through, stronger with the clean air. "Dad, the garden, my garden, those sensors you had me plant—" "Weren't for weather monitoring," Marcus confirmed. "You've been helping us track their movements for months." Just like Jack's computer games were actually running surveillance algorithms. The rain intensified, but instead of weakening their defenses, it activated new ones. The neural agent in the irrigation system was just a cover for the real chemical deterrent, now mixing with the rainwater, a compound Sarah had developed specifically for this operation. "Your team's been exposed for weeks," Sarah transmitted. "Every time they surveilled the farm, every reconnaissance mission, the chemicals in our crops, in the soil itself. It wasn't just monitoring them. It was preparing for this." Reed's response was a burst of gunfire, but not at the family. He was shooting at his own men, who had begun to turn on each other as Sarah's long-term chemical programming took effect. "The asset is compromised," a new voice cut through their comms. Crisp, official, authoritative. "Scorched Earth Protocol. Acknowledged. QRF teams are 3 minutes out." Marcus reached the medical kit on the porch, securing the children's medications. But as he turned to bring them inside, Reed's voice came one last time. "You think this ends tonight? This farm isn't your safe house. It's my target. And your children aren't innocent bystanders anymore. They're active participants in a black operation. Fair game." The approaching helicopters opened fire, their rounds igniting hidden defensive measures across the farm. The peaceful homestead transformed into an active military installation, its true nature finally revealed. Sarah reached her children first, administering their medications with practiced efficiency. "I know you have questions," she said softly, "but right now I need you to do exactly what we trained you for. All those drills, all those games, they were preparation. Emma finished, her breathing steadying as the inhaler took effect. "We're not really farmers, are we?" "No," Marcus confirmed, joining his family. "We're something else entirely, and it's time you learned how to be what you were born to become." The farmhouse's kitchen island slid aside, revealing a spiral staircase descending to a sophisticated command center. Sarah led her children down while Marcus covered their retreat, the approaching helicopter's searchlights cutting through the storm. "Everything you know how to do has a purpose," Sarah explained, moving to a weapons locker coded to her biometrics. "Emma, your gymnastics, urban combat training, Jack's video games, advanced drone piloting simulations." The children watched in stunned silence as their mother transformed, strapping on tactical gear with practiced efficiency. The gentle farm wife was gone, replaced by someone who moved with lethal grace. "Quick response teams incoming," Jack reported from a bank of monitors, his hands moving across the controls with unconscious expertise. "3 birds, 12 operators each. Heavy weapons." Emma studied the tactical display, her eyes widening. "The patterns, they're just like my gymnastics routines. They're standard infiltration formations." "Good girl," Marcus said, joining them below. "Reed's not just coming to kill us. He wants the data we've collected, 3 years of surveillance, on his organization's real purpose." Sarah opened a sealed case, removing 4 advanced combat headsets. "Bioweapon development. The Yemen incident was a test run, his psychiatric facility a cover for human trials." "But you knew," Emma said, her voice steady as she accepted the gear. "You've been preparing us for this moment our whole lives." "Since before you were born," Marcus confirmed. "The program, it changes people at a genetic level. We were exposed during the original Yemen operation. It's why you both have special capabilities." Jack looked up from the monitors. "My processing, speed, Emma's physical adaptability, they're not natural, are they?" "No," Sarah said softly, "but they make you perfect for what comes next. Reed's team isn't just coming to eliminate us. They're coming to trigger the next phase of their program. The farm's soil, the crops, all contaminated with their latest strain." Thunder rattled the bunker's ceiling as Marcus activated the main tactical display. The farm's true defense grid appeared. Automated turrets, minefields, chemical dispersal zones. Their peaceful home had been a war base all along. "Emma, take drone control," he ordered. "Those remote flyer lessons weren't for farm surveying. Jack, you're our eyes. Every game you mastered was real combat software." Sarah finished distributing equipment, including small injectable devices. "Emergency fail-safes," she explained. "If Reed's team breaks through, these will protect you from the bioagent. Your bodies are already partially immune, thanks to controlled exposure through the crops we've been growing." "Mom," Emma said, settling into the drone control station with disturbing naturalness, "all my friends at school—" "We'll be safe," Marcus assured her. "The contamination is contained to our land. That's what this facility is for. A quarantine zone disguised as a farm. We're the last line of defense." The bunker's speakers crackled. "This is Reed. Final chance, Captain. Surrender the facility, and I'll make it quick. Fight, and I'll trigger a full release. Turn your precious children into exactly what they were engineered to be." Sarah's face hardened as she checked her weapons. "He doesn't know about the conditioning. Thinks the bioagent will transform them like it did his men. Instead," Marcus said grimly, "it'll activate their full potential. Emma, show me Sector 4. Their daughter's hands flew across the controls, bringing up a drone feed of Reed's approaching forces. Her movements were precise, almost precognitive. The hidden training emerging. Jack's voice took on a new tone, analytical and sharp. Primary team approaching from the north. Secondary units flanking east and west. They're pushing us toward the barn's underground facility." "Good," Sarah said, sharing a look with Marcus, "because that's exactly where we want them." The command center hummed with power as the family activated their final defensive protocols. Years of preparation, a lifetime of hidden training, all leading to this moment. "Emma, Jack," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "I know this is overwhelming, finding out who you really are, what you were born to become. But right now, I need to know, are you ready to be what we trained you for?" The children looked at each other, years of disguised combat training crystallizing into understanding. Then they spoke in unison, their voices carrying the same steel as their parents, ready to engage. The storm unleashed its fury as Reed's helicopters took up attack positions. Lightning illuminated the farm's transformation, defensive turrets emerging from innocent-looking silos, barn walls sliding away to reveal missile batteries. The CA, Peaceful Gardens irrigation system, converting to chemical warfare dispensers. "Multiple breaches incoming," Jack announced, his voice carrying the artificial calm of his video game training. "They're using thermite charges on the perimeter defenses." Emma's hands danced across the drone controls, her gymnastics-honed reflexes, guiding the remote units with devastating precision. "Target locked on lead helicopter, permission to engage." "Granted," Marcus and Sarah answered simultaneously, years of command experience surfacing. The farm's innocent-looking weather drone launched its first salvo, not bullets or missiles, but focused electromagnetic pulses. The lead helicopter's electronics died instantly, forcing it to retreat. "They've adapted to the neural agent," Sarah reported from her tactical station. "New filtration systems, switching to Compound B." She entered a series of commands, changing the chemical mixture in the farm's defense grid. Reed's voice cut through their comms again. "Impressive setup, Captain. But did you tell your children about Compound B, what it does to human tissue?" Marcus grimaced. "It's not meant for them, Reed. You know that." "Dad?" Emma's voice wavered slightly as she launched countermeasures against the second helicopter. "What's he talking about?" "Focus on your station," Sarah ordered, but Reed wasn't finished. "Compound B was your mother's masterpiece," he taunted. "The perfect weapon, harmless to those with the engineered immunity, absolutely lethal to everyone else, your children included, if their genetic modifications aren't complete." Jack's monitors flashed red. "Ground teams breaching south fence. They're not human anymore, Dad. Their biosignatures are mutated." The tactical display showed Reed's operators transforming as they advanced, their exposure to the original Yemen bioweapon turning them into something beyond human. Faster, stronger, driven by chemically enhanced rage. "Emma, switch to thermal targeting," Marcus commanded. "Jack, activate the sonic defenses. Sarah—" "Already moving," his wife responded, heading for the auxiliary weapons station. "Children, remember your fail-safe injectors. If anything breaks through—" The bunker shuddered as explosions rocked the surface. Reed's forces had found the first layer of underground defenses. "They're herding us deeper," Sarah realized, "toward the central containment vault." "What's in the vault?" Emma asked, her drones taking out 2 more transformed operators with precision. Strikes. Marcus and Sarah exchanged looks. The moment they'd trained for, hoped would never come. "The cure," Marcus finally said. "For all of it. The Yemen weapon, Reed's mutations, even your genetic modifications, a complete neutralizing agent, which Reed wants to destroy," Sarah added, activating another defense layer, "to ensure his weapon can never be stopped." The bunker's lights flickered as another explosion hit closer. Jack's hands flew across his controls, rerouting power. "Mom, the containment fields are failing. If they breach the vault—" "The fail-safe activates," Marcus finished. "A complete purge. Everything within 5 miles dies, transformed, enhanced, or natural." Emma's next words carried a soldier's understanding. "That's why we're really here. Not just to guard the vault. We're the last option. If Reed breaks through, we trigger the purge ourselves," Sarah confirmed. "Better than letting his weapon spread." The command center's main screen crackled to life, showing Reed's transformed face. barely human now, twisted by years of exposure to his own weapon. "Time to end this game," he growled. "Show your children what their parents really created, what they really are." The vault's outer doors began to glow red as thermite charges melted through the reinforced steel. Jack's monitors showed Reed's entire team converging on their position, their mutations accelerating with each passing minute. "Emma, Jack," Marcus said quietly, "whatever happens next, know that everything we did, every lie we told, was to prepare you for this moment, to give you a chance to choose." "Choose what?" Emma asked, her drones forming a last defensive ring around the bunker. Sarah's hand moved to the failsafe trigger. "Choose to be heroes or survivors, like we had to in Yemen." The vault doors began to crack, the storm raged above, and the family that had pretended to be farmers prepared to make their final stand against the monsters they had helped create. The vault doors exploded inward with devastating force. Through the smoke and flames, Reed's transformed soldiers poured into the bunker, their bodies twisted by years of bioweapon exposure, moving with inhuman speed and strength. But the family was ready. Emma's drones struck first, their precision targeting taking down the front line with concentrated EMP bursts that overloaded the neural implants, keeping the mutated soldiers functional. Jack's fingers flew across his console, activating defensive protocols that turned the bunker's own architecture into a weapon. Walls shifting, floors dropping away, automated turrets emerging from hidden compartments. Multiple tangos, east. "Corridor!" he called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Their mutation rate is accelerating. Biosignatures are off the charts." Sarah moved like a ghost through the smoke, her farmer's calluses hiding years of combat muscle memory. Two transformed soldiers rushed her position, but her movements were precisely calculated. The neural agent in her blood gave her split-second precognition of their attacks, allowing her to strike at exactly the right moments. "Emma, Sector 3, Marcus commanded, engaging his own targets with lethal efficiency. "Jack, seal the secondary access shaft." Their daughter's response came through clear and controlled. "Negative on Sector 3. Reed's leading a team through the maintenance tunnels. He's changed, Dad. The readings don't make sense anymore." The security feeds showed what she meant. Reed had fully embraced the bioweapon's effects, his body transformed into something barely recognizable as human. Muscles rippled unnaturally beneath torn skin, his movements a terrible combination of tactical precision and bestial power. "You should be proud, Captain." Reed's voice echoed through the bunker, distorted but still carrying that terrible intelligence. "Your children perform beautifully, everything we designed them to be." Marcus caught Sarah's eye across the command center. A silent message passed between them, the same look they'd shared in Yemen when impossible choices became necessary ones. "Mom?" Jack's voice carried a new tension. "The vault's internal pressure is dropping. If the containment field fails—" "It won't," Sarah cut him off, reaching for a sealed case beneath her station. "Emma, Protocol Omega, just like we practiced." Their daughter didn't hesitate. Her drones reformed into a new pattern, releasing a chemical compound into the bunker's air circulation. The transformed soldiers began to falter, their enhanced systems fighting against Sarah's latest creation. But Reed pushed through, his mutation adapting in real time. "Did you think I wouldn't be ready for your chemicals, Sarah? I've had years. To build immunity, to perfect what Yemen started." The bunker shuddered as explosions rocked the upper levels. Through the command center's screens, they watched their peaceful farm burn away, revealing the military installation beneath. The storm raged overhead, lightning illuminating the destruction in stark bursts. "Jack," Marcus called out, "activate the sonic defenses. Full spectrum." Their son's hands moved across his console, unleashing waves of focused sound that dropped the remaining transformed soldiers to their knees. But Reed kept coming, his mutated form absorbing the punishment as he fought his way closer to the vault. "A cure dies tonight," he snarled through the comms, "and your children complete their transformation. Everything we designed them for." Emma's voice cut through the chaos. "Dad, I have a shot, but the blast radius—" Marcus saw what she meant. Her drones had reformed into a firing circle around Reed's position, but launching their remaining ordnance would breach the bunker's containment. The bio-weapon would spread. Sarah reached for the failsafe trigger, but Reed was faster. His enhanced speed brought him crashing into the command center, sending equipment flying. Jack scrambled back from his station as mutated hands ripped through the console. "Show them!" Reed roared, his voice barely human now. "Show your children what real power feels like." He struck at Marcus with terrifying strength, but years of combat training took over. Father and daughter moved in perfect sync, Emma's drones providing covering fire, while Marcus engaged Reed hand to hand. Sarah circled the fight, looking for an opening, while Jack worked frantically to maintain the vault's failing containment field. "You don't understand, Reed," Marcus grunted, blocking a blow that would have crushed a normal man's skull. "They were never meant to be weapons. Everything we did was to protect them from becoming what you are." Reed laughed, the sound wet and wrong through his transformed throat. "Protect them? You engineered them, the perfect second generation of enhanced soldiers. Yemen wasn't an accident, it was a trial run." "No." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. She stood by the vault's main door, her hand on a hidden panel. "Yemen was a mistake. One we've spent 15 years trying to fix. Emma, Jack, remember the crops we grew, the special vitamins?" Understanding dawned in Emma's eyes as she maintained her drone formation. "You were treating us all this time." "Reversing the modifications," Jack finished, his enhanced mind putting the pieces together. "The farm wasn't just a cover. It was healing us." Reed roared in fury, throwing Marcus aside to charge at Sarah, but she stood her ground, palm pressed against the panel as her children watched. "You're right about one thing, Reed," she said calmly. "We did design them to be better than we were, to have a choice we never had." The panel under her hand glowed blue. The vault door began to open. "No!" Reed lunged forward, his mutated form terrible in the emergency lights. "The cure dies tonight." "Mom, the containment field." Jack's warning came too late. Reed's charge carried him and Sarah through the vault door as alarms blared throughout the bunker. The cure's containment was breaching. In moments it would flood the facility. "Emma, Jack," Marcus called out, his voice carrying years of command authority. "Initiate Protocol Echo. Full lockdown." Their children moved without hesitation, their training taking over. Emma's drones formed a barrier around the vault entrance, while Jack's hands flew across his backup console, sealing emergency bulkheads. Through the vault's reinforced window, they watched Sarah grapple with Reed's twisted form. Her eyes met Marcus's one last time, and he saw in them the same love that had survived Yemen, the safe house, and 15 years of secrets. "Mom!" Emma's scream carried through the comms as Sarah slammed her hand on the vault's internal controls. The cure's containment field collapsed. A brilliant white light filled the vault chamber, and Sarah's final words came through their headsets, clear and strong. "Be better than we were." The cure's release was like a silent explosion, its effects visible through the vault's window. Reed's mutations began to reverse, his enhanced form collapsing in on itself as the compound did its work. Sarah stood in the center of the storm, her body illuminated by the cure's energy as years of neural modifications and chemical enhancements burned away. "Secondary containment holding," Jack reported, his voice thick with emotion. "The cure is contained to the vault chamber. Surrounding sectors are secure." Emma's drones maintained their defensive formation, but her next words carried a soldier's understanding. She knew, didn't she? That's why she took the fail-safe injection earlier. She was ready for this. Marcus watched through the window as his wife smiled one last time, her form becoming pure light as the cure consumed everything. In the chamber, Reed's screams faded to nothing, his twisted body returning to human form in his final moments. "Warning," the bunker's AI announced. "Vault sterilization in progress, chamber temperature approaching critical levels." "Dad?" Jack's question carried the weight of everything they'd discovered tonight. "What happens now?" Before Marcus could answer, new alerts flashed across the command screens. The cure's release had triggered a final failsafe, a complete data purge. 15 years of research, the entirety of the Yemen incident files, everything about the children's genetic modifications, all of it burning away. "Now," Marcus said quietly, "we make the choice your mother wanted you to have." Emma's drones returned to their docking stations as the vault chamber's sterilization completed. Behind its window, nothing remained of Reed, his soldiers, or the woman who had sacrificed everything to end the nightmare. "The farm's defensive systems are shutting down," Jack reported. "All traces of the military installation are being erased. We're going dark." Good. Marcus moved to his children, seeing them clearly for the first time. Not as the weapons they were designed to be, but as the people Sarah had helped them become. "The cure will have neutralized your enhancements. The choice is yours now. We can disappear, start fresh somewhere else, or we can stay," Emma finished. "Be the farmers we were pretending to be. For real this time." Jack's hand stilled on his console. "But what about Reed's organization? The other facilities?" "Already being handled," Marcus assured them. "Your mother's sacrifice activated protocols at every site. By morning, the Yemen weapon will be nothing but classified files and redacted reports." Through the bunker's remaining cameras, they watched their farm return to normal. Defense turrets sank back into hidden silos. The barn's military facades reset to simple wood and steel. The garden's chemical dispensers disappeared beneath innocent soil. "She'd want us to stay," Emma said finally. "Make this place what we always said it was. A home." Jack nodded, powering down his station for the last time. A real home. No more secrets. Marcus looked at his children, really looked at them. Emma, with her gymnast's grace now purely her own. Jack, his analytical mind no longer enhanced but still brilliant, both of them stronger for having the choice. "Then we stay," he decided. "Honor her sacrifice by living the life she wanted for. You not as soldiers or experiments, just as family." The storm above began to clear as the bunker's systems completed their shutdown. Soon there would be questions. Authorities investigating the night's violence, cover stories to maintain. But for now, as emergency lights dimmed and hidden doors, sealed forever, 3 farmers made their way back upstairs to begin again. Behind them, Sarah's last protocol completed its work. The vault chamber, the cure, the remnants of Reed and his weapon, all of it atomized, leaving nothing but memory and choice, and somewhere above, the sun began to rise on a simple family farm. 3 months after that stormy night, the farm showed no signs of its violent past. The barn stood rebuilt, holding nothing more dangerous than hay and farm equipment. The garden bloomed with normal vegetables, their soil tested and confirmed. Clean by countless agencies. Marcus stood at the property's edge, just as he had that first day, but now his eyes saw different things. Not tactical positions or defensive layouts, just the simple beauty of their land. Emma's voice carried across the field as she taught a gymnastics class in the barn, sharing her talent with local kids. Real talent now, earned through practice. Rather than engineering, Jack's coding skills had found a new purpose too. His laptop showed legitimate farm management software he'd developed himself, helping neighboring farms optimize their crops. No more hidden military systems, no more surveillance, algorithms. Just a boy using his natural gifts to help his community. The official story was simple: a disturbed, escaped patient, a brave family, a tragic fire. Sarah was honored as a civilian hero who died protecting her children. Only 3 people knew the full truth, and they held it close. Inside the house, Sarah's presence lingered in 1,000 little ways. Her favorite coffee mug still sat on the kitchen shelf. Her gardening gloves hung by the door. But most importantly, her final gift surrounded them: the chance to be normal, to be who they chose to be. "Dad," Emma called from the barn. "The Henderson's horse is having trouble again. Could use your help." Marcus smiled, hearing only his daughter's voice now, free from tactical overlays and command protocols. "Coming," he called back, his hands calloused from honest farm work rather than weapon maintenance. Jack looked up from his laptop on the porch. "The weather system's showing rain tonight. Real rain," he added with a small smile, "not chemical deployment." They still had moments where the past surfaced. Questions about Yemen, about Reed, about the choices that had led them here. But Sarah had left them something more powerful than any weapon or enhancement. She'd left them the freedom to face those questions as a family. Marcus paused at the barn door, watching Emma demonstrate a perfect cartwheel to her students. Her movements were purely her own now, graceful because she chose to be graceful. Jack's analysis of farm data was his own brilliance, unclouded by artificial enhancement, and for the first time since Yemen, Marcus felt truly at peace. Not because they were safe, though they were, but because they were finally genuinely what they'd pretended to be all along: a family of farmers, working their land, living their chosen life. Sarah would have liked that. As the sun set over their farm, 3 people who had chosen to be ordinary went about their extraordinary task of simply being a family. And somewhere, in the gentle breeze that rustled the crops, in the quiet strength of their bond, Sarah's love lived on, not as a soldier or a scientist, but as a mother who had given her children the most powerful weapon of all: the freedom to choose who they would become.